Nguyen was born in 1971. He immigrated to the United States in 1975 with his family. Spent some time on the East Coast living in Pennsylvania before eventually settling down in California. He's probably best known today as a novelist. His first novel, The Sympathizer, which if it's not on your nightstand, it should be, won the Pulitzer Prize. So it's a pretty good record for a debut novel. He's currently a professor at the University of Southern California. And when he's not writing award-winning fiction, he's writing cultural criticism. And that's what this first selection is from. And I'd like to just take a look at just the first few pages of chapter 1 that begins just memory. So things that seem or ought to seem as being really essential, simple, easy to answer. Who fought? When? Where? How many people died? These seem.
Which countries were involved?
Which countries were involved, right? Like we ought to know this stuff. This ought to be very simple, but it's not. It reminds us immediately. Even these really easy labels, in fact, are papering over incredibly complex situations, right? And timelines, geographies, identities, memories. Good. What else? What else jumped out at you out of this? Other impressions? Interesting.
Well, as I read it, I thought that he was just, yes, you remember Vietnam, but he was just speaking peace in that war in general. Mm-hmm. You know, about war, whether it's World War II, Vietnam, it was just, the topic was about war. Mm-hmm. It's when the year, of course, he's not Vietnam, mm-hmm. But he does agree, he's different. Clarifications or the subject even as a thread about war and war.
Yeah. So he calls it his war in the text, but he recognizes that some of the phenomena he's most interested in exploring feel representative of other wars too. That if the Vietnam War, and we'll use that as a shorthand generally here, not to apply the complexity that Nguyen is offering. But it's true of World War II, the Civil War, of the Korean War, of any number of other wars. And so he is interested in these larger phenomena that govern both war and memory even.
Yeah, like just adding on to that, it's interesting how he said like it's his war, because throughout the whole piece, it feels like he's acknowledging the interpretations of like Vietnam as a Vietnam War by like Americans and other individuals, but as an individual, like as a Vietnamese individual, he's talking about like how he feels the war was perceived by Vietnamese.
Yeah,
Vietnam.
Absolutely. And remember, he's born in 1971, so he's 4 when he comes to the United States. But it is his war, Yeah.
I think an important part of all this is the ways that Southeast Asian refugee communities understand in relationality with each other, the idea of memory, the ideas of remembrance, and that really is how a lot of our communities understand and comprehend what happened. Oftentimes it is through fractured memories. And so this process of understanding the fractured as a whole is really representative in what he writes about in regards to who remembers the war, in what way do they remember it? Because for communities highly affected, we don't remember the war in the same ways, even if it is multiple generations afterwards.
Fantastic. I love too your term fractured, thinking about too that a single, to the extent memory is incomplete versus the kind of collective memory, whole memory, whatever that might be, impossible as it might be to achieve. Fracture too, suggesting diaspora, different whole series of different experiences for the Vietnamese people. I mean, goodness, what a massive group, victors and refugees and everyone in between. That sense of fracture too, I think that's a fantastic description. Your other hands? Yeah.
I think it's interesting, and where he says that for Americans, our whole understanding of Vietnam is from the war. And so much so that's just saying Vietnam, not even saying the war, means the war.
Right. Right. I mean, what a like a haunting observation to have. Yeah, that resonated with me too. Was there on the end of the
If we had called it the Civil War, it was a Vietnam Civil War. It wouldn't have gone down so well with Americans. It's like, so there's a lot of energy and thoughts, and the name is really more important than I think most of us really thought it out before.
I was thinking back as in this vein on the names for some recent American wars that have become much more heavy-handed in their desire to suggest the particular objective, or if obviously the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are loom large. But does anyone remember the American war in Panama? In the 80s? Do you remember what it was called? The official.
I did not have pen of you, but so.
But I don't. It was so it had a really, it was Operation Just a Cause. So as though, I mean, if there is a point where this effect of papering over was it a civil war in Vietnam in which we picked a side and joined? I mean, was it an anti-colonial struggle which we pick a side and joined? Was it right? Or was it the Vietnam War? These terms matter.
Yeah, I think kind of going off what you were just talking about, the statement that he makes, that the battles that shape the nation are often remembered by the citizenry as defending the country, usually in service of peace, justice, freedom, or noble ideas.
Speech about
And dressed in this way, the wars of the past justify the wars of the future, or the present. And I think that applies to, Iraq, Afghanistan, Panama, whatever it is, we use that as we're providing freedom. We are, this is a just cause, or we name it in such a way, or we give it some kind of idea that this is why we are going to war in order to justify it.
absolutely, and then at some point we end up like Alden Pyle, right, from The Quiet American, in the first week, who's there to bring democracy, and Fowler rightly skewers this notion that he's been in Vietnam for an hour, he suddenly understands it because he's read it in a book. Right, and not so this notion then that the way we remember past wars affects our future involvement. I want to look at two other moments really quickly while we're talking about this. So the first thing is the title of this chapter. I love titles, right? I'm an English teacher, right at heart, so these are the sort of I linger here for a minute. Not even the chapter title. Here. Just memory. What's that doing? Is it just memory, or is it just memory? Right. This is the, and I think Nguyen knows absolutely what he's doing here, right? Because of course it's both and, right? That as we were talking about, sometimes we become so culture to shorthand of Vietnam for this vastly complex war, right? Memory. Oh, it's just memory. It's just a memory. You have it or you don't have it, or maybe it's wrong or it's imperfect or No. What Viet is interested in is just memory, justice and memory. Finding a better way to remember, I think, is part of his priority. A better, whatever that might mean. And I think what Nguyen is wise enough to know that this is in some ways the impossible dream, but a journey that we must continue to go down. Or that seems to be, and I don't, to put an orientation into this small into the chapter, but this is where the direction that his work is going, right? In helping us see this complexity and find a kind of justice in that work. What do you make of this fantastic second sentence? It proceeds from the idea, this is his book, that all wars are fought twice. The first time on the battlefield, the second time in memory. What does it mean to fight a war in memory? What does that even mean? Like, I think I know what that means, but what does it mean?
he mentions survivor's guilt on this page, and then he's talking about like by touch or more of survivor's guilt to speak for them, for the people that have passed away. It's interesting how, you know, he's discussing this. So maybe, you know, like part of it is just like maybe fighting survivor's guilt. Does that count at all? Like you don't have to, right?
I think, oh, sure. I mean, absolutely, it counts. I think I think that must be a tremendous part of it. And I'm interested too if we could take survivor's guilt, which is an intensely personal set of feelings, and then maybe think of it as a metaphor for larger collective responses, perhaps, right, from other communities. Is it possible for larger groups of people to experience something like that on a larger scale? Maybe. What else can we make of this? How else do we fight the reward?
I think it can also mean to construct a narrative around the war, to define who is the bad guy, who is the good guy, you know, what happens exactly.
Good. Oh, I that's fantastic. Let's linger on this idea of more constructing a narrative. Could you build on this comment?
I'm not building it, but I was just thinking along the lines of like, there's like a term with like PTSD,
Okay.
post-traumatic stress disorder. And I think it comes because even though like you may have won on like the battlefield, but in your memory, maybe like your conscience is telling you that you shouldn't have killed that enemy that you were like facing at the time, and you're just like revisiting and there's like ruminating on make decisions.
Yeah.
So the battle is still in the mind, even though it's not like a physical battle, but it just like a mental battle, like your own conscience, your own like values, your own principles, and those things play out in the mind rather than it manifested physically.
Oh, tremendous. So so your way of thinking of memory here is in the individual mind, in the individual's memory, and I think we can expand and step just a little bit back from the diagnosis of PTSD to something like war is a social event. It's experienced at the scale at the societal scale, and that we will retain memories of the way our societies engage in or don't engage in different wars, and how we see our own relationship to that matters, and we can continue to reflect on it in the years that follow. I think that holds, and that's for the individual. Yeah, let's keep going.
Yeah, I think that a lot of this also has to do. There's a Hmong American professor at UC Merced. Her name is Ma Vuong, and she just published a book called History on the Run, overview of the Hmong experience in the war, in the Second War in Laos. And she talks a lot about being the fugitivity, the memory of being a fugitive or being labeled as fugitive, or the criminalization of being seen as other, and how that memory chases you in your community regardless of when this war ends, because war for refugees don't end. And that question is always, when does a refugee become a refugee? When does war end for you? And in this moment of asking about memory, we have to also remember that for many Southeast Asian communities, we are oral storytelling people. So that is also how we inherit memories of the war and the histories of what happened. So I think that this part of the battlefield taking place on like the second round in memory also applies to young people in the process of understanding who they are in the context of now being in countries like America, Australia, France, where they continue to be seen as fugitives, as criminals in this process of war.
And your comment too on oral storytelling within communities to kind of reminded me of where this conversation got started with the idea of narrative and creating narrative about the war, and to the extent that these opportunities for generational storytelling, narration can allow different perspectives to emerge, or to highlight, or even, we should acknowledge, suppress or move past other parts of the conflict. And I think it's to know that this is just a possibility. Yeah.
We in America are living with this right now in terms of memories and thoughts about the American Civil War. There are huge groups of people who view the Civil War differently. The process of it
the ending of it, all of it, as like it was two different species of creatures that fought. And so there it is right in front of our face.
I have a colleague in the history department who will only refer to that war as the Slavers' Rebellion. But it comes back to the notion of how we name things and how we call, right? Is how we construct the terms of that, and that's how we narrate it, the battle in memory.
Yeah, and the narrative has a lot to do with I think he's intimating with the identity of the nation. Yeah. How we tell the story tells us who we are as a nation, but our values are, as he was saying before, defending democracy or defending peace, etc. But you think about sort of the aftermaths of, and also that our identity leads into the next war or not, depending how we identify ourselves. Think about people coming out of World War I, and the slogan was, "We did it before, we can do it again," aka fight World War II. People coming out of World War II, some of the people have the slogan, "Never again." It depends on who's saying it and how you're remembering it. Narrative is so linked with identity.
And then the potential for further conflict.
Prefer the cap.
Yeah.
Why not? Never again. That's what I was going to go on page 5. There is a sentence. The second part of it, and yet all yours have murky beginnings and inconclusive endings, oftentimes continuing a preceding war and foreshadowing later. Exactly what he said.
And so already there's this blurring. When does it even end? As I was thinking a little bit about the Vietnam Memorial, and we'll transition. I want to think a little bit about how the United States formally remembers this war, if that's a possibility. It's interesting that to think that there are still casualties happening from the American war in Vietnam, but there's unexploded ordnance. There are soldiers and civilians dying from cancer related to defoliants. To think of these tragedies as anything other than wartime casualties is, I think, or does a disservice for what this, because the war, is it over? Sure, in some way, but if there are still people dying from the events that were germane to the fighting of the war, then I don't know what to say. But it's uncomfortable for me, I think, maybe for you too, to sit with this idea that wars don't end easily.
Yeah.
Or and putting that firm spot can be hard. I want to linger here this question of memory and national memory, and think briefly about the memorial to the Vietnam War, and specifically to the American casualties of the Vietnam War in Washington, D.C. This is the national memorial to this. Has anyone been and seen this? Yeah. Thoughts about it? What is it? How would you describe it? What is this thing?
It was very moving.
Moving. Yeah. What makes it moving?
Just the forms, the numbers, the amount.
Yeah. Okay, great. Is anyone, is it tall? Is it long? I'm genuinely curious for folks who haven't seen it. What's it like experiencing it? I want to linger here for a minute, because again, we're still in this project of memory and how we remember the war. And we're going to come back to that. But for now, I want to linger on the memorial, especially for folks who've seen it. How would you describe it to somebody who hasn't? Names, how many?
58,000.
Ooh, fantastic. 58,281. And growing. As the other folks are accounted for. So there are more names on it now than there were in 1982 when it was erected.
Maya Lin, the American architect, was the one who designed it.
Yes.
So I think that was very, very notable. That was just because she became very famous after that, and just in the fact that it was, according to online, minimalist architecture. So yeah.
Minimalist architecture. So we're looking at a black wall with names written in white block script, right? Yeah.
To answer what you just said, it's reflective, which I think is really important. But I remember when her plan was accepted, it was excoriated. They wanted to have a couple of soldiers dragging a statue, and it was hated.
Yeah.
And she was made fun of. And it was interesting to watch over the years. It wasn't that people started to say good things or that opinions changed in the way it was mentioned. It was that the population who visited, the soldiers who had come, the photographs of people making imprints from pencil shadow
rubbings.
rubbings. I think there's been a massive change, and I think it's now much loved in the country.
Yeah. So if you have a moment, I didn't print it today, but in the email, there's a terrible PDF of a New York Times article from 1982, right? In which we learn that there was a letter written to President Reagan, and this is in January of 1982, from 27 Republican congressmen who denounced Lynn's design. Quote, "We feel this design makes a political statement of shame and dishonor rather than an expression of our national pride," they wrote. What could we do with that?
He's got a point.
Okay, yeah. So what's let's linger here for a moment. I mean, I rarely will ask you to take a congressman seriously, but let's linger for a moment and think what are they trying to communicate here? Let's figure out what's going on.
Saying that like that's a bad thing.
Okay.
Like this this incredible memorial.
Yeah.
Instead of doing what probably all preceding war memorials had done,
Get us ready for the next one.
glorify the act and fact of war. This one did exactly what this particular was James Watt.
Yeah, so James Watt was part of it. The quote I read was from the letter that these congressmen sent, but he was the Interior Secretary, I think.
The idea that Miley's memorial, in fact, took the opposite tack from what had come before. It was not to glorify the war, right? It does, in fact, evoke in some people that we should be ashamed of having done this. And, I think you're right. It has over the year that she was a 21-year-old college student when she came up with this this plan, and it was an open competition. She's gone on to do some other incredible work. She's now very much honored, ends up being excoriated. But her this work, I think, took a really powerful view of that war, one that was shared, but maybe not expressed by a lot of people at the time.
Fantastic. You're describing a kind of war for memory, right? War over memory, and how we might think about that. And interestingly enough, now that enough time has passed, we can see the shift from who was it? Ross Perot. Some of you may remember Ross Perot referred to it as a trench. Other critics called it a scar on the National Mall, right? I mean, just really intense criticism for what's now thought to be a deeply moving space. And I love that it's reflective too, is another word that came up for that. If you've been to this memorial, it's also literally reflective. And that you can sort of see an image of yourself looking at it, which is quite striking.
If I remember correctly, there was also a bit of racism involved with the idea of why it was not national, like a nationalist view. because she's Asian American, but phenotypically like the Vietnamese people, we though not. So there, I think that's also another part of the memorying of the Vietnam War as well, in that it does not only affect folks in Vietnam, but also larger perceptions of who are Asian, and who are threats against the state.
Yeah. And could I add to your comment the notion of who gets to sort of do the remembering? I mean, we all do, but this is a particularly prominent mode of national remembering. One of the ways that Lynn's design became so popular, in fact, came from a miniature that she did that then went on like a road tour. And they had a smaller version of the memorial that could be disassembled and put into a semi truck, and they took it around the country. And it turned out that once you got outside of Congress, that people loved it, and they began to interact with it in a way that they do not with any other memorial.
It's also remembers each individual soldier, each rather than soldiers of glory and war is stated by each name and each town that it goes to, and with the model, the people of that town remember exactly the name of the first person who died in the Vietnam War, exactly the name of your colleague in high school who went in the army. Yeah. So it's the individuality that appeals. One thing.
Oh, please. Yeah.
If we want to point out, like, in Vietnamese, there's this word called like nhớ, which means both like to remember, like to remember and to miss. And I never really thought of it that way while I was speaking Vietnamese growing up. Like it's just that word always had like a bit of like sadness to it. But this Vietnamese American poet named Ocean Vuong actually pointed out like that, like that the meaning to it. And he basically was talking about his mom that was dying of cancer, who eventually passed. But when he was talking about her when she was still alive, and there had been some time since they spoke on the phone, she asked him like, do you miss me? Like, do you like nhớ mẹ? And he basically said like, he would think like, what do you mean? Like, do I remember you? Like he basically said like that he feels like he misses her more than he actually remembers her. So like that word kind of has a double meaning almost, like when I think about it in Vietnamese, like I always, like it means miss, but it also means remember. And to me, that has like a different weight to it. It feels more sad in Vietnamese than just that word in English. Like it just doesn't translate well when like this author who's Vietnamese is using the word like memory, right? It just doesn't have like that type of weight that like as Vietnamese, like individually, I don't think about like when I'm speaking in that measure until someone.
What's the name of the poem? So do you have it? If you have it, Dan? Just
it's just like a book. It's called On Earth, Your Brief Voyages. Yeah.